Once around the park, James, and don't spare the horses.
It's showtime.
Well, indeed, here we go. It is showtime. And, okay, just a confession off the top. Let's face it, everybody put your hand up and admit we were all wrong. Everybody, all the pundits, all the experts, all the insiders, the backroomers, everybody said, no, the election call is going to come on Wednesday. Well, here we are. It is Friday afternoon, January the 24th. It's on the Ledger Ontario Politics podcast. And as we record this, a mere, 3 hours ago, the announcement came.
We will be calling the election next Wednesday. I'll be seeing the Lieutenant Governor on Tuesday. We need a mandate from the people to fight against Donald Trump's tariffs, the attack he's coming against our families, our businesses, our communities. And with a strong mandate, we will be able to fight with Donald Trump to make sure we stop the tariffs and make sure that we give certainty to the people of Ontario. It may take investing tens of billions of dollars. We'll do tens of billions of dollars. It's no different than during the pandemic. We'll make sure we secure people's livelihoods, and I will do whatever it takes to protect the people of Ontario, in turn, because we're the engine of Canada, protecting all Canadians. We will not back down.
Uproarious applause. He was there in Brampton to make a transportation announcement. I can't even tell you off the top of my head now what it was, but I remember him being introduced by Patrick Brown, the mayor at the time. But of course, that was the first question out of the gate after the announcement. And so clearly they were ready for it. So let's get to it. And here we are. We're not officially into the writ period because that doesn't happen until Tuesday, but why not assume the better or the worse? I don't know. Kathleen Wynne is here, the former Premier of Ontario. Keith Leslie joining us, longtime observer at Queen's Park, and you see and hear him on CHTV. And let's see, the first time we met Tim Hudak, he was the leader of the PC party, then he was the head of the Ontario Real Estate Association, then he went out and hung his own shingle, and now he's with Council Public Affairs. It's the guy who can't keep a job, clearly.
Yeah, as soon as they get to know me, they say, time to move on. Did you know that by the end of the time I was in politics, by my last term in the legislature, I did not represent a single inch of soil than when I was first elected. My riding kept changing before they caught up to me, Dave. So that explains my career.
There you go. Okay, well, just quick around here. And, Kathleen, I know I was all ready to say, what's it all like, and the nerves and everything else in terms of preparing for this? And are you going? Are you not going? We're going. It's a little unconventional to be making your public transit, the transportation announcements, et cetera. And a hospital announcement, I think, was in there at some point. But the first question out is the news of the day, and we're going to the polls. Does it surprise you he didn't wait until Tuesday to visit the Lieutenant Governor?
I think the public buzz about it had gotten to the point where they needed to just say yay or nay. I think he was announcing a tunnel on the Hazel McCallion line or something.
Oh, there you go. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So you know what, Dave, whether it was today or next Wednesday, I think it had become clear in the last couple of days that they were going, and it was almost like he needed to make the announcement so there would be a little bit of excitement about it. I think if he'd waited till Wednesday, it would have been pretty anticlimactic because people already knew he was going.
Well, Tim, I'm suggesting then that the reason he's doing this is just to take some of the heat out of the super caucus meeting that was coming up on the weekend. Why have all of the intrigue and everything else? There's a level of excitement that it gets injected immediately into that meeting, no?
The super caucus. I invented the super caucus. That was that sounds like something I would do. I'm so happy it's still around. Some days I wish I was back in the super caucus. Well, look, I think that what's different here is that, people will say, well, the David Peterson legend, right, called the snap election, it backfired, and then we got Premier Bob Race. What Ford has done differently, similar to what Tim Houston did in Nova Scotia, and Keith can confirm that, you socialize it early. They've been talking about an early election for what now, 6 months or so? And I think by even announcing it's going to happen a week early, they try to take a bit of wind out of the sails of this notion that it's a trick, it's not fair ball, it's, gaming the system. It's part of the socialization process, the story, why he wants to become premier for another 4 years, and you stick to it.
Keith, I want to get into the whys and wherefores of it in a minute, but before we came on, we were just talking about the old days when we were at the park. There would have been the push to get the buses going. This is going to be a completely different approach to and through media based on how this is going to play out over the next month.
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be social media. It's going to be podcasts. Your traditional media is going to be scrambling to sort of get in on the game, essentially. You saw the premier was asked if he's going to have a costed platform, which he never did before. And he responded with, well, it'll be in the budget. Well, there's not going to be a budget. There can't be a budget before the House isn't sitting. So in other words, no, but he needs to spend tens of billions of dollars. So what does he need a mandate for? He just spent $3 billion. Did you get your checks yet, by the way? $200? Have you got your checks yet? Gee,
I haven't got mine, but I've got it earmarked for something already. So
yeah, it's coming in this, seriously, the timing of this election call, I think coming Wednesday next week is going to be bang on when most people have gotten or are getting their $200 checks per child and per adult. So the timing is obviously there. But to me, I wonder, I know he's clearly taking advantage of a situation, his Captain Canada thing. He complains about there's a vacuum in Ottawa. Well, now there's going to be technically, there's no one other than the premier, but there's technically a prorogation of the Ontario legislature as well. So why would he need to do this to get a mandate when he clearly has 16 months left on a very large majority government? So he's going to have to push back against that, give some good reason. And the mandate. Well, you've got the mandate. And he says, I need a 4-year mandate because Trump's just been elected for 4 years. If we're still going toe-to-toe with Trump for 4 solid years over this stuff, it's going to take a lot more than that. I just don't see that as realistic. So he's going to have to justify why now $150 to $175 million to hold a provincial election. He's not going to give us a positive platform. He's got a mandate. He's got a very large majority of government for at least another 16 months. So why is he out there now doing this? He's making himself vulnerable. Now he's going to share that Captain Canada stage because the mainstream media, at least, are going to have to give equal time to Bonnie Crombie and to Merritt Stiles. And all of a sudden, it's not going to be just him talking about Trump. It's going to be them talking about the disaster and the healthcare situation that he hasn't improved. All-way healthcare is still a major issue. Emergency departments are being closed all over the place. Housing, they're way off their targets. They've made the worst month ever in December. And homelessness has just grown. All these issues are going to be coming back at him every day. Issues he's not really dealing with now when he's writing the Captain Canada, I'm going to deal with Trump thing. I don't know if it's a wise decision to call the election now, but it's clearly when he's so high in the polls, the party's clearly ready for it. They've got all their candidates nominated. Everybody's set to go. Clearly, it's the momentum behind this has been planned for a while. And as my colleagues have said here, people have been softened up. They're waiting for it to come. It's not a big surprise at all. Someone said that they have at the Super Caucus on Saturday, they're giving training on signage. I wonder if that's, how you put in a sign in frozen ground in February. That's another whole.
But Dave, it was interesting to Keith's point about the announcement and all the stuff that's going on. It was interesting that he said in his announcement for it, he said, it's just like the pandemic and, I need a mandate just like in the pandemic. Well, the pandemic happened. And he had a mandate. He didn't go to the polls 2 years after 2018 to get a mandate to deal with the pandemic. So, this is very, I think, very thin cover for a completely political decision. But to Tim's point, he absolutely prepared the ground. I think there are many, many people in the province who at the beginning will not even realize that it's an early call of an election. They will be reminded by the opposition parties, I think, very, very quickly. But many people won't even realize it's an early call because we've talked about it for so long now. But it's unnecessary. There's absolutely no doubt. And the vacuum that's left by him calling an election now is, I think, irresponsible. It's a precarious time. I think that right now it would be far better for him to be focusing on, corralling the premiers, making sure that we have a single story that we're telling when we talk with folks in the United States. But that's his decision. So here we go. Stay tuned.
Well, on that point, and I think to some degree, the last election was like the Seinfeld election. It was an election about nothing, and everybody played peekaboo. And I still remember Sean O'Shea running down the street trying to catch up with the premier, and that might have been the only time that we had sort of this random access to the premier on the campaign trail. But at the same time, there is, I think what people will identify with is that existential threat economically, that it's going to mean jobs, that the heat is up. And back to your point, Keith, when he was talking about the costed platform, I thought it was really interesting the way he played that in terms of, are you going to tell us how you were going to spend those tens of billions of dollars?
Premier, I don't think people know exactly where you're going, especially in terms of the tens of billions of dollars you're talking about spending now in stimulus, and you haven't tabled a budget in a year. Why will you not release a fully costed platform, sir?
Well, Richard, we're fully releasing it. And guess what, Richard? Maybe you're one of the jobs that I'm going to have to protect, because when the tariffs hit, it affects the media, it affects manufacturing, it affects every single sector in this province. So you better pray that we get elected, because I'm going to protect everyone's job, including the media's job.
Well, that's a tall order, Tim. I don't know if I would have gone there, but clearly passionate.
Yeah, for sure. Well, a couple of things. I think we're in the weeds a bit. We've all been very involved in politics for a long time. I'm happy to talk through that. But I think when it comes to, a week and 28 days down the road, I'm not convinced that voters will be saying, I'm going to punish Doug Ford because he called an early election, or this looks opportunistic. Some may feel that way, but I think it will come down to, in this existential crisis we're facing with President Trump and the tariff threat, who do I want to have holding the steering wheel during this really rough road ahead? And Ford is on his game. I think he's at his best performance that we've seen. And I think people will get behind a strong leader when they cast their ballot, even if there is a bit of a smell to when the campaign was called.
Okay, so let's just get into that whole issue of, if it's not Ford, then who vis-a-vis Trump? And he was very strong on that, the premier, when he announced, telling us on Friday morning that, we're going to the polls, and he has to, because he has to save us all and save the country from Donald Trump.
Just imagine this, folks. Imagine Bonnie Crombie or Merritt Stiles sitting across from President Trump negotiating a deal. It would be an absolute disaster. And God help us if that ever happens.
Let me suggest to him that he could avoid that entirely. We don't have to have an election. He could do the negotiations without the possibility of Crombie or Stiles in the chair sitting across from Team Trump. Wow. No?
Sorry. I was yelling in my head, so you
were saying that out loud. I just want you to know, Tim, that he can avoid that right off the bat. He can be the guy who takes control to make sure neither Crombie nor Stiles are across the table from Trump.
Another reason why I think they went a week early. So these arguments will happen, right? You could still be premier, you could still do this. I just don't know if that's going to last. So I'll reinforce one point and then add another. I do believe that through a 35-day campaign, the shift will then focus. I don't think it can sustain an argument about should the election have happened or not. And I believe it will focus around, who is going to be the one we want in the big chair during one of the greatest challenges in Ontario's and Canada's recent history. And really, Doug Ford has defined that role under this crisis. And number two, on that front, with respect to, Ford's leadership, I've been the opposition leader running in a campaign. You try to get every moment to contrast yourself with the other two parties, particularly the premier at the time. Here's what I do instead. As Keith pointed out, they'll still get time, but the overall media landscape, Dave, is going to be so flooded with what Trump tweeted this day, what he tweeted halfway through the day, what Danielle Smith has said, what's going on with Trudeau. It's awfully hard for an opposition leader to find a platform when there's so much noise in the environment.
Kathleen?
Sorry, I had not seen that clip because I was on calls all morning, so I didn't see it. So that's why I was having that reaction. I hope you guys hear the inherent sexism in that. I hope you hear the big guy saying that you have those two women, have one of those women, it's going to be a disaster. I am stunned that he is so unaware that that's what he's saying, or maybe he isn't. Maybe that's exactly the strategy, to, just to play up that only the big guy who's also a bully can take on the bully in the States. If you're a parent of a kid with autism, or if you are a homeless person, or if you are someone who is a nurse in a long-term care home, or if you're somebody who's looking for a family doctor in this province, you're going to, for a minute, think about Trump and the threat of tariffs. It's very important, obviously, but you're also focused on what has not been happening for you in this province for years, the support you have not gotten. And so that, I think, is going to become the discussion in this election. If the opposition parties are on their game, which they will be now, they expected this election just like the rest of us. And so those failures and flaws of this government are going to be on the table. And, Doug Ford can say he's the only big guy who can stand up to Donald Trump, but there's a whole lot else at risk in this election. And, that, for me, that's the upside of an election now. So let's get into it. Let's talk about what's really gone on in this province for the last term.
Keith, I want to get into the backbone of that opposition strategy in a second, but just remember that 2 years ago he was saying Olivia Chow as the mayor of Toronto would be an unmitigated disaster, and then they hugged and made up, and they have a very good relationship after the fact. People have accepted, normalized his rhetoric.
Oh, absolutely. And to Kathleen's point, he's normalized it to the point that I did not pick up on the fact that he was pointing at two women and saying they can't stand up to Donald Trump, only I can. So yeah, he's absolutely normalized this kind of misogynistic speech. What I took away from his response there, though, was that he's suggesting that he will be sitting across the table from Donald Trump, and that's extremely, highly unlikely to ever happen. He might get a meeting with him, but I don't think he's going to be sitting down negotiating with Trump. So he's saying to Ontarians, you can't have the NDP or Liberal leaders, both of whom are women, you can't have them sitting down with Donald Trump. Only I can do that. Let's presupposing that's ever going to happen. As I say, I think that's just inserting himself a little too far into the narrative at this point, but it's going to work for him. And until we have a new prime minister or a new Liberal leader or the federal election and another new prime minister again, or a third one in a year, all that going on, I think he should have stayed to the Captain Canada stuff and stayed away from the election for now, but because he would have got rewarded, I think, in the end, 16 months from now at the scheduled election. But he's made his decision to go here now, but it's going to muddy the waters with all sorts of other issues in addition to the Trump and the threatened tariffs.
So, Tim, when we look at it from that perspective, and I'm the guy and I'm the only one who can do this, and the Captain Canada idea, part of the conversation and some of the questions that he answered this morning detailed the dates when he expects and plans to be in Washington, on official business, leading the premiers. To me, that just reinforces that whole image. One, two, it's going to take all the oxygen out of whatever comes out of the campaign over those 2 or 3 days around those meetings.
Yeah, look, I'll reinforce my point, Dave, earlier on, that it is media make every effort to give equal footing. The debate, you have equal footing, but there's going to be so much in the media environment that advantages an incumbent. It will limit the time that Marit Stiles or Bonnie Crombie have, or Mike Schreiner. And secondly, it gives him a chance to look, if not like the premier, like the prime minister in Washington, D.C. Who knows if he gets to Mar-a-Lago, right? So it reinforces the ballot question of, again, who do you want to have in the premier's seat during these very tumultuous times ahead? And I appreciate what the premier and Keith said about you don't want to come across as sexist, and folks could read it that way. It's definitely a campaign about up to the job, not up to the job. And he'll have to make sure he's careful of his tone so it won't be read as anti-women. The big part of the debate, we've seen him square off before with Premier Wynne and Andrea Horwath, and we'll see if it's truly on the sexist angle or simply a matter of you need somebody with the experience and the chops in this position, and I've demonstrated that.
So when we look at that, though, as the math plays out, Kathleen, there's going to be a newly elected premier, a premier-elect in this province before we even have, somebody replacing Justin Trudeau as the leader of the Liberals and a new prime minister. So to that extent, there is some stability in that. We know that all this turmoil is going on. Why not rip the Band-Aid now and let's get it all done as opposed to stretching it out over the next 9 months?
Well, because it's, first of all, it's 16 months. He's got 16 months left in his mandate. There's absolutely no argument against, staying in office for those 16 months, because this is a tumultuous time, right? Why go into an election if that's what you're saying? It provides stability because there'll be a new premier. Well, we've got a premier. We've got a premier with a mandate. We've got a premier with the ability to spend what he needs to spend to support the economy of Ontario, and get to the other side of the federal election. But the reality is, Dave, he doesn't want to get to the other side of the federal election. He wants to run while the Liberals are still in office in Ottawa. He wants to run before the Greenbelt report comes out from the RCMP. Those were the original imperatives for wanting to call an election early. The Trump election has just come in as a gift for Doug Ford in the last few months. So he wants to get this done for his own political purpose, and the fact of the Trump election has provided him political cover for it. But it's nothing more than that.
And just to be clear, last episode I called bullshit on the idea that we have to go and have to get a mandate here. But I can see in terms of retail politics,
political,
you can write a book on this, and this is the how-to and the why-fors, and let's realize that the politics of it are masterful. So
the timing politically as well. You've got a federal Liberal leadership race underway with the winner to become the prime minister. Where's Bonnie Crombie going to get the staff and volunteers to run her provincial campaign for the next week plus 28 days? A lot of them are tied up in the federal campaign already. Timing for Doug Ford on this one was, as we say, we all saw these things lining up ahead of time. And then Donald Trump came along and he happens to be the chair of the Council of the Federation of the Premiers Group. It was a gift from heaven for him, pretty much. I mean, it's a big threat for the country, and he's standing up to it treating it as a threat. But it's also a huge opportunity, and I see him as taking advantage of it. And quite frankly, when he was asked about David Peterson doing it 35 years ago, he cracked a smile and laughed. He said, "Media, you're upset 35 years ago." So clearly, he's looking more at Tim Houston's experience of, even though the first bill Tim Houston signed into law 3.5 years ago was a fixed election date, he softened people up and went a year early because, get this, he needed a strong mandate to run against the federal government. But he got it. He got his re-election. People did not hold it against him, basically because he's been a pretty good premier in his first term.
And
so,
Chrétien was,
pardon?
I was going to say Jean Chrétien was a similar example, right? Did call an early election against an unprepared Stockwell day. And, he had his story. And while people argued at the beginning about whether it's the right time or not, if you've got a story that you stick to, and the opposition's unable to take enough shots at you, and you talk about what you want to achieve in the time ahead, the recent history has actually been favorable to the incumbent as opposed to the Peterson story, where they seem to scramble, not really have a game plan, and look desperate during the campaign by tossing in the commitment to get rid of or reduce the PST.
Well, I should also suggest, Keith will remember this, that the Stockwell Day failure was on the final day of the campaign. Didn't they make something like 13 campaign stops with no ability for the media to file stories?
Yeah.
It was insane. He wanted to be everywhere, but we never got to tell the story.
I thought it was the Sea-Doo that did it.
Yeah,
wasn't
that image on the Sea-Doo, absolutely. Sometimes it just takes one. Wasn't it Gilles Duceppe with the hat at the cheese factory? Those kind of images.
All good
Poor
fun.
Stanfield with that football between his legs. He apparently caught 3 previous balls, but the one that went between it. That's the image everyone has. Like 60 years later, I can still picture that image in my mind.
That poor man. Didn't you feel for him? Oh, God.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it happens to be that the worst bloody airport to get through happens to have his name on it in Halifax. I'm just saying.
There you go. So
That's
we'll
just
tell
brutal.
Doug Ford to stay off of Sea-Doo. Don't try to catch a football they put on the hairnet, and I think he's going to be okay. Especially all at once.
That's right.
Now there's an image.
There's the inside advice for the war room.
Well, remember during the pandemic, he got grief for actually being in his snowmobile outfit, but he stopped to talk to 4 other snowmobilers during the pandemic. And it was one of those, I thought, really ridiculous moments where the media is trying to make, he's on vacation in the middle of the pandemic. I'm sure those 4 snowmobilers he was talking to with at this, it was in the Muskokas. I'm sure they were talking to him about the pandemic and the restrictions and everything. Like, he's not off duty. He might even be actually enjoying a skidoo ride, but he's not like he's abandoned Ontario. I always find those things about, the politician on vacation to just be absurd, low-hanging fruit that really helps and serves no one. But
Well,
I remembered him in those suits,
Yeah.
and I just thought that was silly.
yeah, and so what if he was going on a skidoo ride?
Yeah, exactly. He's talking to people. What?
Yeah.
You can't fault him for that.
We've talked about how the politics of Ontario, the U.S., Trump, etc., it plays into all of this, and it's all happening against the backdrop of the void in leadership in Ottawa. And the premier was really heavy on that when he made his announcement. I mean, he wants to make it really clear that the feds are basically, shit in the bed when it comes to this.
We will be calling the election next Wednesday. I'll be seeing the left. Right now, we don't have a stable federal government. We won't have one till the next election. I'd love to see the election being called tomorrow. But again, that's all the more reason Ontario needs a voice at the table.
So one of the things I noticed, and I think it was in Politico, he gave an interview, Keith, and he was talking about the various things and how he would do this, but was all raving about Chrystia Freeland and how, what a great job she did in the last, negotiations and so on. It sounds like a small thing, but, you got to wonder whether or not his level of support, endorsement, glee, whatever you want to call it, actually is going to turn some heads on the federal side vis-a-vis the Liberals.
That's a very good question. I mean, I truly don't know. I can't read that. His endorsement, it's not too late for him to buy a Liberal leadership. I think it's open to anybody at this point, so he could vote for it. But it appears while he may have that respect for it, and he always did, and he always professed it, it appears that the current Liberal caucus members are not lining up behind her as much as they are behind Mark Carney. So while I'm sure Doug Ford's saying, she was terrific to work with, and I think people looking back to her first Trump 1.0, her dealing with Trump in the first Trump administration, she got a lot of respect and a lot of props for that. So I think Doug Ford, sticking with her on that is nice, but I don't think it's really going to help her. I think she's in a really tough race against Mark Carney. And from at least just the public figures that we see, the public Liberals that we know, it seems to be that Carney's a little bit ahead right now in the overall support amongst voting Liberals.
Yeah, and Kathleen, I think the whole issue of late, particularly over the last week or so, as things have ramped up and inauguration has happened and so on, there's been a lot of concerns stated about the stability of the Team Canada unity. And it's happened right across the board in terms of who's saying what and who's saying what to whom and so on. To what extent does this complicate, though, the Liberal leadership, in as much as all of the candidates are going to be forced to come out and have something bold to say about what will you do about Trump? And, I think there's a legitimate concern there that being careful about it, because while you need to sort of stake your ground, you also need to be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, they're walking a tricky line right now, and and just to go back to the first point about Chrystia Freeland and Doug Ford, I don't know a lot of Liberals who are looking for the Liberal leadership candidate who has Doug Ford's endorsement. Just if I can just say,
It's a curious world.
I just don't. I know, but I just don't know a lot of Liberals who are looking for that. So that's the first thing. But in terms of that line they have to walk, yeah, it's a challenge. But I think what a lot of us who will be voting in that leadership will be looking for is a clear strategy, a clear and honest assessment of the situation, and trying to cut through some of the political noise, because Ford has just added to the political noise, but there's already such a ton coming from the south of the border. So we're going to be looking for, okay, who is going to be the straight shooter here, who's going to tell us exactly what they're doing, what they're going to do. And maybe that is who can outline how they're going to be flexible and respond to the situation. But that kind of honesty, I think, is what we're going to be looking for in a very confused political landscape.
Well, Tim, the Liberals may not be waiting for Doug Ford to plant a sign saying I'm all for Christia, but at the same time, it cuts the other way to be able to say, we need to deal with this and put the politics out of it. We need to be unified. And so would it hurt one way or the other for any one of those candidates, Carney, Freeland, et cetera, to say what Doug Ford's doing is the right thing? We need to be able to support and, speak out and move forward on that in a unified way.
I think, look, that's not my tribe, but I've been with the Blue Tribe, and they tend not to react well to that sort of thing. I hear what you're saying for general public, but this is an army of partisans, right? Who rah for the home team. Let's go out there. Let's beat the hell out of the other guys and let's win, or at least get a good, strong second place to fight another day. So appreciate your point, Dave. It's very rational, but I don't think that's the way many party members think. Here's what I worry about. I pointed about a bit last time as well. I do think that one member, one vote system is badly broken. I think it has been corrupted over time. We've seen even within my own party in the past where, and the National Party had an issue with this as well, the Conservative people were buying memberships, people who were not citizens, who did not exist. They're dead people who have voted in these contests. I worry because we're actually electing our next prime minister. Aside from Premier Wynne, we don't have any say in that. And the ability of those who would rather cater to Hamas than care about our Jewish population, those that might have some control from the communists in Beijing, right? Like I actually sincerely worry that it is so easy to get a free membership that this thing is corrupted. I really think that for all parties, we need to take a fundamental look at this current system. So to answer your question, Dave, no, I think it's going to be special interests that will promise this, promise that will drive up the signups for the Liberal Party.
Well, and I guess, and I'm being halfway facetious even when I suggest those things, but at some point there needs to be a recognition of that change or of the tone around where we are. It's an incredibly unique circumstance that we find ourselves in politically. I can't remember a federal election in the offing, a federal leadership happening at the same time, and a provincial election being called all within, it was going to happen within 6 weeks. We're going to have a new premier elected, a new Liberal leader, a new prime minister, and then another election called federally.
Yeah, I guess the timing of that federal election is still a bit up in the air. Who knows if Jagmeet Singh can be convinced to help a new prime minister find some roadway before and stay on until October when the election is actually scheduled. But yeah, it's pretty unique, and especially that Liberal leadership convention happens to pick a prime minister, not an opposition leader, not a third party leader, a prime minister. So it's actually stunning that all this is going on. Quite frankly, though, I think it's something that Canadians can absorb. We can understand that there's a provincial election in Ontario, that there's a federal election going on, and that whatever Donald Trump says is going to stir up shit no matter what he does and when he says it. It's just going to be, we're constantly reacting to Donald Trump. So to see these Liberal leadership candidates have to figure out what they can do that's different, how to differentiate themselves, how to get attention, how they would deal with Trump. Well, it's a very tough road to go down. How they can actually do that and stay with Team Canada's approach. We've got to get the Team Canada approach as well locked in. And we don't as yet. I mean, we still have Alberta definitely offside with what the rest of the country wants to do as far as dealing with Trump. But it's a matter of, I don't think anybody really wants to cut off oil and gas exports to the United States, but we want to be able to say we have that option, that we're all on side with whatever needs to be done will be done in, strategic ways. But we're not seeing that yet. And so it makes it difficult with all this going on for the Canadian voter or just a Canadian citizen to go, who's best to handle this in this situation? Who's going to guide us through this Trump craziness? Because it is going to be crazy. And even the whole tariffs thing, Trump has twice this week said, he's thinking about February 1st. But the executive order that he signed earlier in the week said that the cabinet ministers are to review all the trade deals and get back to him by April 1st. So does that give us 10 weeks to maybe work on this? Who knows? I mean, it's just whatever he says, whenever he says it. But apparently there's been no back channel communications yet from U.S. officials to Canadian officials saying, hey, this is coming down. These tariffs are ready. Get ready. Here's how you can know what we're going to. It hasn't happened yet. So it might still all be Trump BS that will eventually maybe become reality or maybe not.
Yeah, but I
But to your-
think
sorry.
Kathleen, just on that here we're always feel like we're a step behind the Trump factor here. I keep going back to the idea that he is transactional. We saw his speech in Davos this week, talking about all of the things that he needed, and we all got excited about it in Canada because he mentioned, but he laid the ground on everybody in Europe and so on. But my point is the degree to which we are ill prepared in the moment for the Trump administration to take advantage of the leadership vacancy here in this country, the idea that we don't, if we're distracted by elections and leaderships and so on. I think that, that really is an underlying insidious issue.
Yeah. So, first of all, I think that when you say we're a step behind, that assumes that Trump is moving in a linear direction, right? That assumes that he's putting one foot in front of the other and we can predict where those footsteps are going to lead. And I think that's part of the problem, Dave. I don't think we can. What I do know is that there are very, very smart officials at the provincial and the federal level who are putting together plans despite whatever the political malaise is or the political machinations, and there are going to be lots of them. Those officials are getting us ready, have been getting us ready, and there are documents ready to use when the politicians go on those trips or whatever. I think a big problem we've got right now, we've got a number, but a big problem we've got right now speaks to something Keith said about the Team Canada. Danielle Smith and now Scott Moe are not on side. They're not part of a coherent and cohesive strategy. And so that's why I think the number one kind of relentless action that needs to be taken now is getting that Team Canada story in place. It's not that we don't have the material. It's not that we don't have the facts and figures, and the officials have all of that. It's the U.S. facing front that we put in place, and it's not coherent right now, and that's a big problem for us. That's the not readiness. In terms of material, we've got the material, we've got the arguments, we know the arguments, we just need the people to deliver those, which in fact bolsters my argument for why we shouldn't be having a provincial election right now. That's not the activity we need to be engaged in.
So just for those of you catching up now, we're talking about going to the polls in Ontario on the 27th day of February. I see the lower thirds on all the TV newscasts saying he's going to call the election Wednesday. He actually said in his announcement he's going to visit the Lieutenant Governor on Tuesday. So all of this is happening very quickly. For those of you taking programming notes at home and you're new to the show, you will know, if you've been listening since day one, that when the election got called in 2018, and I sent a note to John Wright and said, what do you think? We should do a podcast about this. Let's just jump in and do it. And John said, sure. So we went ahead and we did the daily show that started May 9th, 2018, when the writ was drawn up, and away we went. Since then, we have done similar things with the provincial and the federal elections. So it is our intention to go daily with On the Ledge. Between now and the 28th, we'll have to figure out how to wrap all of this up when the election's over. So we've got some a whole cast of voices that we're going to be able to bring to it. So just if it looks like we're spamming your podcast feed, we're not. We're actually going to be there on a daily basis to bring that to you, and look for some of the characters to pop out of the woodwork in terms of who will be there. And we'll also be broadcasting some of this stuff on News Talk 1010 in Toronto. So lots of opportunity to keep up and to catch up. I do want to say, though, that when he made the announcement, Kathleen, when he didn't use your name or reference your name directly, but boy, he sure pointed to the black cloud that you presented and you governed over at Queen's Park.
The people will have a choice in the next 30 days if they want to go backwards to the dark days and the gloom and doom that we all experienced in 15 years under the Liberal and NDP rule, that 300,000 people lost their jobs.
Yeah, so they're running against you now. I know you're not on the ballot, but they're running against you again. And so there seems to be this, whatever angle that seems to be convenient here, to the point where you can run looking at Trump and then run looking rearview mirror and get into the strategies around this. I think you made the point earlier, Kathleen, you talk about the families who live with kids who live with autism and all of those things that haven't happened. And I know it was a sore spot for your government to deal with the autism.
Yeah, but you know what, Dave? He doesn't want to run on his record on those things because those things have gotten worse. We can have a policy conversation. I know that's not what we're here to do, but he doesn't want to run on his record. He wants to bring out those old tropes from 2018, most of which were not true to start out with. And he wants to run against Trump. And that's why when he's asked by the reporters about his platform, a costed platform, he doesn't have one. He's not going to have one. The man runs on slogans, not platforms, and certainly not costed platforms. So that's been his modus operandi, and that's going to continue to be what he'll do.
But Tim, bringing up 2018 or the mid-teens in this decade, it would be really easy for all of us to look back and say, were we better off in 2015, 2014 than we are today? And most of us would say yes.
I can't remember.
That's convenient.
That's way to go, eh? Well, look, I don't think that's going to be a lead point. It might be a reflexive point. But it does fit in with the overall argument. It sounds like it's going to shape up from the Conservatives that we are in unprecedented, challenging times, and that you need to have a strong, experienced leader to make sure that we're going to take care of the people of Ontario, provide a better future. And I think anything that contributes to that message, you'll hear that over and over again in the campaign. Be interesting to see what the opposition leaders do, to how much energy do they spend saying we shouldn't have a campaign and get into that argument. I think that will run out of steam, especially with the socialization of the early campaign. I think their challenge is to reinforce what Premier Wynne said, here are the things that aren't going right, and here's my plan to make it better. The challenge for them is their volume's going to be limited because of the craziness around this.
Yeah, I was thinking that today, Keith, when I see all the opposition leaders kind of trotting out and we'll work together, we'll work with you. Well, okay, that's off the table now. So, I think you've got to really present and have a strategy. And here's the challenge too. I'm looking at, the OntarioLiberal.ca/candidates. And, the one name missing on that page is Bonnie Crombie right now.
So Mississauga, don't worry about it.
Well, yeah, I don't know if you wait in terms of, look at me over here in Mississauga. If you're doing that, here's the problem. You run the risk of that being, your only opportunity to lead the news that day. Otherwise, to Tim's point, everything gets, reactive to what the premier is doing vis-a-vis Trump.
True enough, but when you're going for your third consecutive majority government, campaigning against the previous government really, has lost a lot of its luster at this point. There's no ammunition there. You're going for your third government. Anything that's responsible, going wrong and right in our lives for the last 7 years is your responsibility, your take. And so you want a third term? Let's talk about your record. And I think that's where we need to go. And I think he's vulnerable on a lot of the record stuff. And to what Kathleen Wynne said earlier about, the RCMP Greenbelt report is still hanging out there. That's something they definitely want to get ahead of. They don't want to have to campaign against this. They don't want to have to campaign against Pierre Poilievre and whatever his government is going to do if there's a federal election and if Poilievre wins it. They do want to run against Trudeau, and now's the time to do that. Even though Trudeau is a lame duck prime minister and the Liberals are going to be picking a new one, it's still Trudeau that he's going to be running against for the most part. I don't think running against the Kathleen Wynne government from 8 years ago is actually going to help Doug Ford any at this point. But to Tim's point, I don't think it's going to be a key part of their campaign, but it's going to be something they mention probably every stop.
But here's the problem I have with that. And we've all said we saw this coming, and Tim, to your point, we've normalized this conversation. You've socialized the idea of an early election, et cetera. Presumably the opposition parties were paying attention. There doesn't seem to have been any level of preparation in terms of what our message is going to be to distinguish ourselves, not only from Ford, but from each other. Because the NDP and the Liberal vote, I realize, there's some cannibalization going on there, but they're not eating into the Ford numbers. So, Tim, I don't know, they may just end up, good on Bonnie. She might become the leader of the opposition, but it doesn't mean that Ford's going to have any less of a majority in the legislature.
Look, I'm bullish of another majority government for Doug Ford, and that's, Dave, not a prediction. That's a spoiler. It's hard to imagine another path. It'll be interesting to see who comes in second place. Like it is. So, I have been in that spot. As I took a pause 10 years ago, 2014, I was the opposition leader. So I certainly
were, my friend.
going so well in 2014. I had a whole campaign.
You just blanked that from your memory.
Oh man. So what I remember though is we were in a minority government. You don't know when that was going to happen. It's not the same circumstances. It was an upcoming budget. Andrew Horvath said she wouldn't support it. Premier Wynne called the election, but we had every campaign stop mapped out. We knew what our message is going to be day by day. I had my team in place, and that's difficult to do when you're under-resourced. Bonnie Crumby's only been the leader for just over a year, so I bet they've made their best facsimile. But man, you really catch the opposition shorthanded in this type of situation. New Democrats should have a better plan, you would think, but there hasn't been much cutting through, despite the fact that if we would have placed bets on this, we probably thought we would have been an election in 2025. This is just a bit earlier. Does it concern you, Kathleen, that the Liberal leader is not declared as a candidate officially in one riding or not, and here we are into the writ?
No, because I think she knows where she's going to run. I think they've got a plan for that, and there'll be an announcement, and there'll probably be some, there'll be some policy platform announcements at the same time. So no, that doesn't worry me at all. I think to Tim's point, yes, the timing is a bit different, and she hasn't been the leader for as long, Tim, as you were the leader, obviously, in 2014. But they do have a plan. I'm absolutely sure they have a plan. I'm absolutely sure they know where they want her to be. She was in Aurora yesterday, meeting with seniors. Like they have a strategy, and I think that the campaign, to your point, Dave, about it hasn't. Their positions haven't punched through. The campaign will give an opportunity for that to happen. I agree with Tim that there will be more noise in this campaign because of Trump, but still there will be an imperative for there to be coverage of what the opposition parties are bringing forward, what Mike and Marit and Bonnie are talking about. That will get covered much more than outside of the writ period.
All right. Well, let's leave it there because we're going to have plenty of opportunity to sift through the entrails as we.
Dave, can I just say one thing before we go? I
just
want to do a mini announcement. So I've made a decision, guys. Hard as it is to leave you, I'm going to step back during this period. I feel like the confluence of all the things we've been talking about, it's a hyper-partisan period, and I'm just going to step back and play a different role in, whatever, supporting candidates or whatever. But I'm not going to be doing some of the public commentary that I've been doing for the next little while. So nothing about the experience. I love talking to you guys, and it's been great. And I hope I see you on the other side.
We know where you live, so
you know where to find me.
We'll come back as soon as you can.
Yeah,
come back as soon as you're comfortable.
I'm going to go on the record and vote against this motion, but pretty much great work. They hope to see you soon.
We only have one vote each. Kathleen has 4, so just so, and then that's the way this goes. No, it has been fun to have you in the room with us. I appreciate and I understand your position on this, and I know it comes from a place of integrity. So thanks for that, and thanks for giving us the time that you have over the last 4 or 5 months, and guaranteed we'll be bugging you in the weeks to come. So thank you.
It's been awesome.
Terrific.
All right, so let's leave it there, and we will come back. And as I said, the plan is to go daily. So by the 1st of March, I will be flat out breathless. And actually, the 1st of March, I'm getting ready to go to the PDAC, which is the big mining.
It's a big show.
Yeah, it is. So we're looking forward to that, and we've got a lot to talk about there. So, and have no idea how this election might play in that or not, but the folks at PDAC may have a few thoughts on what's happening federally as well. So lots of politics in the future, lots of podcasting around the politics to come. So be patient. If you Watch us on YouTube. I don't think every show will be on YouTube, but every show will certainly be on Spotify and Apple. And as we mentioned, we are going to broadcast a good deal of it on News Talk 1010 in Toronto. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for being here. If you like what you see, make sure you share it, like it, comment. We've got a talkback button, davetrafford.com. You'll find it there on the Ledge page. And that's it. I'm Dave Trafford for Story Studio Network. This is On the Ledge, your Ontario Politics podcast.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.